Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. When Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was first published in 1852, it quickly became one of the most influential works in American literature and a critical catalyst in the abolitionist movement. The novel tells the story of Tom, a black slave whose moral integrity, faith, and sacrifice deeply resonate throughout the narrative. Stowe's vivid portrayal of the brutality of slavery, particularly through the character of Uncle Tom, raised awareness about the plight of enslaved people and sparked widespread debate about the institution of slavery. The book not only played a pivotal role in galvanizing anti-slavery sentiments in the United States, but also made an international impact, fueling debates on race and morality. As one of the best-selling novels of the 19th century, Uncle Tom's Cabin remains a poignant, controversial, and essential part of American literary and cultural history. In this long-form video summary, we will journey through the novel's key events, themes, and characters, exploring how it contributed to the moral and social discourse of its time. This summary will provide an immersive experience, diving deep into the novel's intricate narrative, while engaging with the emotional and historical significance that still echoes today. Now, let us begin with the first part of Uncle Tom's Cabin. The novel begins in the state of Kentucky, where the Shelby family is struggling to maintain their plantation. Arthur Shelby, a man of honor and integrity, faces a financial crisis that threatens his family's well-being. In a difficult decision dictated by circumstances beyond his control, he is forced to sell several of his slaves, including one of his most loyal and trusted servants, Uncle Tom. Arthur's wife, Emily Shelby, is deeply distressed by the sale of their beloved slaves, especially Uncle Tom, who has been like family to them. Despite the emotional toll it takes on her, Emily, though compassionate, cannot sway her husband's decision. In this moment, the novel introduces the deep moral and emotional conflict that slavery imposes, even on those who are not inherently cruel, but are bound by the system of oppression. Uncle Tom, a devout and kind-hearted black man, is portrayed as a pillar of faith, a model of Christian virtue. He has served the Shelby family for many years, and the news of his sale strikes a devastating blow to him and his family. His wife, Aunt Chloe, is heartbroken over the separation. But Tom, ever the man of faith, reassures her that they will endure this trial with God's guidance. Tom's calm and steadfast demeanor in the face of adversity speaks to the core of his character. He is unwavering in his belief that no matter what happens, his faith will carry him through. Even in this sorrowful moment, he maintains a sense of hope that, though his world is being upended, he is still a servant of a higher purpose. Uncle Tom's departure is particularly emotional for Mrs. Shelby, who had always treated him with a level of kindness and respect that was rare in the world of slavery. She comes to realize, however, that despite her personal regard for him, she is helpless in the face of the laws and customs that govern the institution of slavery. This realization forms part of the novel's exploration of complicity and the moral ambiguities of the time. Though Mrs. Shelby harbors no ill will toward Tom, she, too, is trapped by a system that forces her to make difficult decisions that that result in harm to the people she cares for. As Tom prepares to leave, she hands him a small token, a keepsake that symbolizes the affection and respect she feels for him. Yet, she knows it is not enough to prevent the devastation they are about to face. While Uncle Tom's fate is sealed, another character, Eliza, a young enslaved woman who has served the Shelby family, is also about to face a heart-wrenching decision. Eliza has a son, Harry, and when she learns that he too will be sold as part of the Shelby family's debt settlement, she cannot bear the thought of losing him. The love of a mother for her child is a central theme in this part of the novel, and Eliza's determination to protect her son drives her to take desperate action. In a dramatic moment that showcases her fierce maternal love, Eliza flees the Shelby estate, taking Harry in her arms and running through the snow-covered landscape in an attempt to escape the clutches of slavery. Eliza's flight is not just a physical escape, but a powerful symbol of resistance. She knows the dangers that lie ahead: slave catchers, harsh weather, and the constant threat of capture. But her desire to protect her child pushes her forward. Her courage and resolve embody the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child, but also the larger, often tragic fight for freedom that enslaved people faced. As she crosses the icy river, the image of her and Harry clinging to each other for dear life creates an indelible emotional impact. It is a moment of pure defiance against a system that sought to strip them of their humanity. Meanwhile, Tom is being transported to New Orleans, where he will be sold to his new owner, a man named Mr. Haley. Haley is a ruthless and profit-driven slave trader who views Tom not as a human being, but as a commodity to be bought and sold. He is everything that the Shelby family is not: unfeeling, callous, and driven solely by the need to make money. For Haley, the moral cost of human suffering is irrelevant. All that matters is the bottom line. As Tom is moved farther away from the familiar and loving environment of the Shelby household, he is thrown into a harsh new reality where his value is measured solely by his ability to labor. This transition marks the beginning of Tom's transformation as he moves from a life of relative comfort and respect to one of brutal exploitation. On his journey, Tom faces the full force of the institution of slavery in its most brutal form. Unlike the Shelby family, who, despite their complicity in the system, treated Tom with some degree of kindness, Haley has no such reservations. His treatment of Tom is cold and dehumanizing, as he sees no value in him other than his ability to work. As the story unfolds, we see Tom begin to grapple with the full weight of his situation, yet he remains steadfast in his faith. Even as the physical abuse and cruelty increase, Tom holds on to his belief that his suffering is part of God's larger plan. His faith, though tested, never wavers, and he becomes a beacon of hope and moral strength for those around him. As Tom's departure from the Shelby estate becomes permanent, the reader is introduced to the broader social landscape in which slavery is not only accepted, but institutionalized. The Shelby family's helplessness in preventing Tom's sale speaks to the deep-rootedness of slavery in the fabric of American society, especially in the South. It is a system that denies human dignity, distorts familial bonds, and dehumanizes individuals for the sake of economic gain. Through Tom's story, Stowe begins to unravel the layers of this societal structure, showing how the lives of enslaved people were shaped by forces beyond their control. Eliza's escape, meanwhile, serves as a stark counterpoint to Tom's fate. Her decision to flee is a courageous one, yet it also highlights the inherent risks and tragedies involved in such escapes. Both characters, in their respective journeys, are forced to confront the same system of oppression, but their paths are different. Eliza, fueled by a desperate desire to protect her son, seeks freedom at any cost, while Tom, though also a victim of this brutal system, embodies a quiet dignity and faith that will come to define his character throughout the novel. As the two characters' stories begin to diverge, the reader is left with an overwhelming sense of the emotional, spiritual, and physical toll that slavery exacts. Uncle Tom's Cabin lays the groundwork for a larger narrative about resistance, faith, and the struggle for freedom, one that will continue to unfold in the chapters to come. But in these opening moments, we see the beginning of two very different journeys, each driven by love, loss, and the desire to survive in a world that offers little mercy to those enslaved. The seeds of Tom's and Eliza's respective trials have been sown, and the full force of their struggles has yet to come. As Uncle Tom is transported to New Orleans, he is forced to endure an agonizing journey. The journey not only takes him farther from his family and the familiar life he had known on the Shelby plantation, but also deepens his understanding of the brutal nature of slavery. The world outside of the Shelby household is one where cruelty and inhumanity are rife, and Tom is now thrust into the hands of Mr. Haley, the ruthless slave trader who will be his new master. This man sees Tom only as a commodity, an object to be bought and sold. There is no trace of the compassion or respect Tom had experienced with the Shelby family, and this cruel new reality challenges Tom's faith in ways he had never anticipated. Throughout the journey, Tom's inner peace and resilience become apparent. Though the physical hardships of the journey are harrowing, he is subjected to exhausting conditions, locked in chains, and deprived of comfort. Tom maintains a calm demeanor. His unwavering faith is a source of strength that helps him endure, and in the face of such adversity, he draws strength from his belief in God's plan. His spirit, unbroken by the physical pain, remains steadfast in the hope that God has a greater purpose for him, even if he cannot yet understand it. This powerful faith is what distinguishes Tom, and it becomes a central aspect of his character throughout the story. At the same time, the novel introduces a stark contrast in the character of Mr. Haley. Haley is an embodiment of the systemic greed and cruelty that supports the institution of slavery. His sole concern is profit, and he sees people like Tom not as human beings, but as tools for economic gain. In Haley's view, slaves are simply property, no different from the horses or cattle he trades. He is quick to dismiss any notion of kindness or moral responsibility, seeing no reason to treat slaves with any decency. His lack of empathy and the cold calculation with which he views Tom's fate are indicative of the dehumanizing forces that fuel the institution of slavery. However, the most striking element of Haley's character is his relentless pursuit of control over Tom. In the course of the journey, Tom is subjected to repeated dehumanization, and Haley is keenly aware of the power imbalance between them. He ensures that Tom's subjugation is total by exerting his control through threats, physical punishment, intimidation. Tom, however, remains remarkably composed in the face of Haley's cruelty, an almost supernatural endurance that stems from his deep, abiding faith. He refuses to let Haley's cruelty extinguish the light of his spirit, finding solace in the hope that he is fulfilling God's will. During their journey, the harshness of Tom's treatment becomes more pronounced. There are moments when Haley's cruelty reaches its peak. He strikes Tom repeatedly, forces him to endure long periods of physical strain, and shows no remorse for the pain he causes. But even in these moments, Tom refuses to break. His faith in God serves as his shield, and though his body is being battered, his soul remains untouchable. Tom's ability to maintain his dignity in such circumstances paints a profound picture of the psychological and spiritual strength that enslaved individuals often had to summon in order to survive their circumstances. It is a strength that comes not from the physical realm, but from a higher spiritual place. Meanwhile, Eliza's journey takes an entirely different path, one rooted in the desire for freedom. After fleeing the Shelby plantation with her son, Harry, Eliza encounters an entirely new set of challenges. As she flees through the snow-covered landscape, the reader witnesses her maternal love and determination, qualities that give her the strength to face the perilous journey ahead. Unlike Tom, whose path is shaped by his acceptance of his fate, Eliza's escape represents an act of defiance, a refusal to accept the brutality of the world she lives in. Her flight symbolizes the lengths to which enslaved individuals would go to protect their families and achieve some measure of autonomy, even if it came at great personal risk. Eliza's escape is fraught with danger from the very beginning. She knows that if she is caught, the punishment will be severe, not only for her, but for her child as well. The heart-wrenching moment when she must cross the icy river represents both a physical and symbolic crossing, a moment of liberation, but also of great risk. She is a mother desperate to protect her son from the horrors of slavery. And in this moment of crisis, her love transcends the physical barriers of the world she is trapped in. In the midst of the harsh conditions, she plunges into the freezing waters, holding her son tightly as she crosses the river, risking everything for the chance of a better life. Eliza's bravery is a striking contrast to Tom's calm resignation, but both characters share a common thread: their deep love and commitment to those they hold dear. While Tom's love for his family is seen through his unwavering faith, Eliza's love for her son is expressed through her desperate, courageous actions. Each character embodies a different form of resistance: Tom through faith and endurance, and Eliza through direct action and flight. Both are fueled by the same desire for safety, freedom, and love, but their paths diverge in the ways they seek to achieve these goals. Back in New Orleans, the brutal realities of slavery begin to emerge more sharply as Tom arrives at his new owner's plantation. The shift from the relative comfort he had known with the Shelby family to the harsh conditions under Mr. Haley's ownership reveals the full extent of the institution of slavery. Tom's role as a slave is now defined solely by his labor and his worth as property. He is no longer a beloved servant, but a tool of economic profit, to be worked to exhaustion and disposed of when no longer useful. His fate now lies in the hands of a man who is not interested in his character, his faith, or his humanity, but only in his value as a laborer. In New Orleans, Tom meets new individuals who will shape the course of his journey. Some are fellow slaves, others are free, but all are touched by the pervasive force of slavery. Tom's faith continues to be a guiding light for those around him, and even in the bleakest of circumstances, he offers comfort and strength to others. His moral compass remains steady, even as the world around him becomes darker and more hostile. It is here, in New Orleans, that the full weight of the system of slavery begins to sink in for Tom, and where he faces some of the most difficult choices of his life. The juxtaposition of his inner peace with the external forces of cruelty and inhumanity creates a powerful emotional conflict that drives much of the narrative. The novel continues to deepen its exploration of the complexities of slavery, its emotional toll, its physical brutality, and the ways in which it twists the relationships between people. Through the experiences of Tom and Eliza, the novel begins to show the full range of human responses to enslavement, resignation, resistance, hope, and despair. Both characters, in their own ways, serve as symbols of the fight for freedom, even in a world that offers little hope. But as their respective journeys unfold, it becomes clear that their paths will cross again, and the struggle for liberation will shape the fates of all those caught within the grip of slavery. As Tom settles into his new life under Mr. Haley's ownership, the stark realities of the plantation system become even more apparent. The brutal conditions of the world he has been thrust into begin to erode his faith in the possibility of kindness or justice. Tom's new home is a place where the value of a human being is determined entirely by their ability to work and produce, and not by their intrinsic worth as a person. The other slaves on the plantation are treated with the same cruelty as Tom, their lives governed by the whims of their masters and the harsh systems that keep them in bondage. In this environment, Tom's faith becomes both a source of personal strength and a mark of difference from those around him. While the other slaves, though respectful, are cynical and broken by the years of oppression they've endured, Tom's unwavering belief in God gives him the resilience to survive. He sees the suffering of his fellow slaves, their lack of hope, and the anger that simmers beneath their outward composure. But Tom holds on to the belief that his suffering is part of a larger, divine plan. His faith not only allows him to endure the physical and mental torment, but also sets him apart from those around him. This steadfastness is not always understood or appreciated by his fellow slaves, who view Tom as overly pious, a man who will not fight back even in the face of endless injustice. Mr. Haley, however, is a man of business, driven by an insatiable desire for profit. His treatment of Tom reflects his view of people as mere objects for trade and exploitation. The moment Tom is sold into Haley's hands, the value of his life diminishes. To Haley, Tom is no different from any other asset, a piece of property that can be bought and sold to the highest bidder. Throughout Tom's time in Haley's custody, the commodification of his body and spirit becomes painfully clear. Haley's actions are not only morally bankrupt, but reflect the systemic view of enslaved people as nothing more than economic tools to be used until they are no longer useful. The dynamics of power on the plantation are as oppressive as they are unyielding. Tom is expected to work long hours in grueling conditions, carrying out tasks that seem endless and thankless. The physical demands of the labor, combined with the emotional toll of separation from his family, weigh heavily on Tom's soul. The distance between Tom and his wife, Aunt Chloe, grows as he faces the harshness of his new reality. The letters they exchange serve as a bittersweet reminder of the love and connection they once shared. But the hope that sustained Tom during his earlier days with the Shelbys begins to fade. The bond with Aunt Chloe is still present, yet the ever-present pain of longing and separation starts to take its toll. In the midst of all this hardship, Tom meets another important character, the kind-hearted and compassionate Miss Eva St. Clair. Eva is the daughter of Augustine St. Clair, a man who owns a large plantation and possesses a contradictory nature. On the one hand, St. Clair is not as overtly cruel as many of the other slaveholders, and he is occasionally moved by the suffering of his slaves. However, his occasional compassion is inconsistent, and he remains complicit in the system of slavery, ultimately unable or unwilling to take action to free those who are enslaved under his control. Despite his fleeting moments of mercy, St. Clair is still a product of the institution of slavery, unable to completely challenge the system that sustains him. Eva, however, is different from her father. She is a young girl, but her innocence and goodness shine through in all her actions. When she encounters Tom, she sees him not as property, but as a human being. Their interaction is filled with a deep sense of empathy and connection that goes beyond the limits of the time and the oppressive system in which they live. Eva's belief in God and her love for her fellow human beings transcend the boundaries imposed by slavery. She represents the possibility of hope and love amidst the cruelty, and in many ways, she symbolizes the possibility of redemption and transformation within the novel. Her kindness toward Tom is not merely an act of charity. It is a recognition of Tom's intrinsic worth as a person, independent of his status as a slave. Tom, too, recognizes something in Eva that transcends her social status. Their interactions serve as a reminder that despite the dehumanizing forces of slavery, human connection can still exist. The purity of Eva's heart and her belief in the goodness of people, even in such a dire situation, become a guiding light for Tom, offering him brief moments of respite and solace in the midst of his suffering. Eva's relationship with Tom, however, is not without its complications. Her father, St. Clair, may be more sympathetic toward his slaves than most, but he remains unable to act on his beliefs. The question of what it truly means to care for someone under the system of slavery looms large throughout the novel. St. Clair's reluctance to take action against slavery, despite his moral reservations, serves as a commentary on the complexities of the institution. Slavery is not merely a matter of individual cruelty. It is a pervasive system that entraps everyone, including those who may be sympathetic to the plight of the enslaved. St. Clair's inability to act decisively highlights the pervasive moral paralysis that the system of slavery engenders. Despite these contradictions, Eva's presence in the narrative becomes a source of inspiration for both Tom and the reader. She is a figure of purity, compassion, and love, qualities that stand in stark contrast to the cruelty and greed that define the world around her. Her character is a symbol of the potential for good in a world that seems dominated by evil. In a sense, Eva represents the possibility of change, She is the embodiment of a moral compass that has not been tainted by the corrupting forces of the institution of slavery. Her love for Tom and her desire to see him treated with kindness offer a glimpse of what the world could be if people were willing to see beyond the labels imposed by society and recognize the humanity of all people, regardless of race or status. As Eva's relationship with Tom deepens, the novel begins to confront the question of whether it is enough to merely recognize the humanity of the enslaved, or if more must be done to challenge the system itself. This tension is felt most acutely through the character of Miss Ophelia, St. Clair's cousin, who is initially skeptical of Tom's faith and piety. Over time, however, Miss Ophelia's interactions with Tom and with Eva's influence cause her to question her own beliefs about slavery and human rights. The dynamic between Miss Ophelia and Tom represents the broader societal tensions between the desire for personal compassion and the recognition of systemic injustice. The days continue to unfold in the heart of the St. Clair household, where Tom's presence is both a reflection of his inner strength and a reminder of the moral complexities that linger in the hearts of those around him. In this part of the story, Tom's connection with Eva deepens, and her father, Augustine St. Clair, struggles with the inherent contradictions of his life as both a slave owner and a man capable of deep empathy. As Tom moves through the motions of his daily tasks, he finds himself caught between the love of a young girl who sees him as a human being and the weight of a system that regards him as little more than property. St. Clair, who has shown moments of tenderness toward his slaves, finds himself at a crossroads. Though he occasionally expresses regret over the institution of slavery and the treatment of Tom, he is unable to make a decisive break from it. His moral conflict is not unique in the world of Uncle Tom's Cabin. In fact, it represents the broader struggle of many characters who possess an innate sense of justice, but remain complicit in a system that rewards them for their participation. St. Clair's inability to act decisively underlines one of the central themes of the book, the paralyzing effects of privilege. For St. Clair, slavery is a convenient evil, one that provides him with wealth and status. While he may feel pity for his slaves and have a personal affection for them, the social, economic, and cultural forces at play in his life keep him from challenging the status quo. As St. Clair becomes more engrossed in his own moral quandary, the novel introduces another key figure in the storyline, Miss Ophelia. Ophelia is a northern woman, morally upright and deeply committed to the abolitionist cause, but she has her own biases and limitations. Initially, Ophelia is dismissive of Tom's unwavering faith and piety. She sees him as little more than a superstitious man, and her attitude toward him is one of both condescension and discomfort. She is one of the more overtly good characters in the narrative, but she too must contend with her own prejudices and assumptions about slavery. Ophelia is initially unable to see Tom as an equal, believing that his faith and devotion are the result of ignorance rather than true spiritual insight. In her mind, a man like Tom, enslaved and oppressed, should not have the same access to the divine that a free person would. It is in Ophelia's evolving relationship with Tom that we see one of the most poignant and gradual transformations in Uncle Tom's Cabin. At first, she is hesitant to accept his faith, but as she begins to witness his actions and the deep conviction with which he carries out his duties, she starts to change. Tom's strength of character begins to chip away at Ophelia's preconceived notions. Slowly but surely, she comes to see that Tom's faith is not just a matter of comfort in an unjust world. It is a profound reflection of his inner integrity and moral resilience. In many ways, Ophelia's development mirrors that of the broader American consciousness during the time period in which the novel was written. Many people, like Ophelia, were deeply concerned about slavery and the fate of enslaved people. But they were also deeply tied to racial prejudices that clouded their understanding of true justice. Through Tom, Ophelia learns that slavery is not simply an issue of charity or sympathy, but an affront to human dignity. Meanwhile, Eva's health begins to deteriorate, and the suffering she endures casts a shadow over the entire St. Clair household. Eva's sickness serves as an allegory for the physical and moral decay that slavery breeds in society. Despite her personal suffering, Eva remains a figure of radiant goodness, embodying the possibility of redemption even in the midst of her illness. Her kindness toward Tom and other slaves in the household becomes a powerful example of how true compassion can transcend even the most extreme forms of oppression. Eva's affection for Tom deepens, and her desire to free him from slavery becomes a focal point in her final days. Her illness becomes a catalyst for change, and through it, the St. Clair household begins to confront the reality of slavery in a way they had not before. Eva's death becomes a turning point in the narrative, one that forces the other characters to grapple with the choices they have made and the consequences of their actions. Her passing represents not only the end of a life that could have changed the world, but also the loss of innocence in the story's moral universe. Eva's death is tragic, not only because it marks the loss of a beloved young girl, but because it underscores the limitations of individual acts of kindness in a world built on systemic injustice. In Eva's final moments, she expresses a desire to see Tom freed from slavery, a wish that ignites a sense of urgency within the St. Clair household. However, Eva's father, Augustine, is still unwilling to make the radical choices necessary to dismantle the institution that allows his daughter's wish to remain impossible. The emotional weight of Eva's death is felt most acutely by Tom, who sees her passing as a divine sign of the suffering that still lies ahead. Her death deepens his faith and strengthens his resolve to endure whatever may come. Tom's unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity, despite the evil of slavery, remains a powerful source of strength for him. Through Eva, Tom is reminded that his suffering is not in vain, that it is part of a larger divine plan. While Tom's faith becomes increasingly tested by the suffering he endures, it also serves as a refuge, a place where he can find solace amid the cruelty. In the wake of Eva's death, the St. Clair household is thrown into turmoil. St. Clair, devastated by the loss of his daughter, seems momentarily moved to action. He begins to talk about freeing his slaves, but once again, his indecisiveness and inability to act stand in stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. His moral dilemma continues to paralyze him, leaving Tom and the other slaves at the mercy of a system that values them only as property. This section of the novel underscores one of the book's central themes, the tension between personal morality and social responsibility. St. Clair's inability to act on his moral convictions reflects the broader societal failure to challenge the institution of slavery, even among those who are moved by the suffering it causes. Tom, meanwhile, embodies the possibility of redemption through unwavering faith and perseverance. But the novel continually questions whether individual acts of kindness can ever be enough to overcome the systemic evil of slavery. The ripples of Eva's death spread far beyond the St. Clair household, reverberating through the lives of those whose paths had intertwined with hers, especially Tom. While Eva's passing had been the catalyst for change in the St. Clair family, it also signified the beginning of a much harsher reality for Tom, one that would shape the trajectory of his life from that point forward. The unresolved conflicts of Augustine St. Clair's heart, however, continued to simmer beneath the surface. His grief for his daughter lingered, but his lack of resolve in confronting the systemic evils of slavery left him trapped between his sorrow and his privilege, unable to break free from the very institution that had caused so much suffering. Despite the moral pull to release his slaves, St. Clair faltered. The death of Eva had rekindled his inner turmoil, yet his commitment to change remained weak and unfulfilled. He makes promises to Tom, like offering him his freedom. But time and time again, these remain just words, fleeting as the wind. In a sense, St. Clair's broken promises to Tom mirror the failure of society as a whole to live up to the ideals of justice and equality that it espouses. These promises represent a moral intent unactualized, a commitment to a better world that does not come to fruition. St. Clair's conflicting actions serve as a sharp critique of the complacency of many people in positions of power, those who acknowledge the wrongs of slavery but find it too difficult to act. However, Tom's journey takes a decisive turn when he is sold to a new master, the cruel and unforgiving Simon Legree, a man whose very presence represents the brutality of slavery. Simon Legree is introduced as a villainous figure whose moral degradation is as extreme as St. Clair's moral indecision is passive. Legree's plantation is a far cry from the relatively more humane conditions of St. Clair's household. It represents the harsh, dehumanizing reality of slavery's worst excesses. Legree's estate is filled with an atmosphere of fear, violence, and degradation, a stark contrast to the moral struggle and occasional compassion Tom experienced under the St. Clair roof. Upon arriving at Legree's plantation, Tom's initial shock at the oppressive conditions is only the beginning of his suffering. Legree himself is an embodiment of everything that is wrong with slavery. He is abusive, callous, and ruthless. He places no value on human life other than as a tool for his profit. And this cold utilitarian view of humanity is exemplified in the way he treats his slaves. Unlike the relative mildness that Tom experienced at St. Clair's, the shift to Legree's household is a harrowing one. Tom is subjected to physical abuse and overwhelming brutality that he had never known before. The contrast between Legree's cruelty and Tom's steadfast faith is striking. Tom's refusal to break under the weight of his oppression highlights one of the novel's central themes, the strength of Christian faith as a source of resilience and resistance. Despite the physical toll that Legree's abuses take on him, Tom's spiritual resolve never wavers. He clings to his belief that there is a higher power that will ultimately bring justice. This belief in divine justice provides Tom with a sense of hope, even in the most dire of circumstances. Tom's unwavering faith acts as a form of resistance in itself, not by overt defiance, but by a quiet endurance, a refusal to allow the cruelty surrounding him to corrupt his soul. Legree, however, is determined to break Tom. The intensity of Legree's attempts to subjugate Tom becomes more pronounced as he uses manipulation, threats, and physical violence to try to destroy Tom's spirit. In one of the most horrifying episodes in the novel, Legree orders his men to whip Tom mercilessly, hoping that this will make him submit and reveal the location of a fellow slave named Cassie. Despite the excruciating pain, Tom remains steadfast and refuses to betray his fellow slaves. This moment represents a crucial turning point in Tom's journey, as his physical body may be crushed, but his soul remains unyielding. His commitment to Christ and his moral compass are his shields in this brutal environment, and they provide him with an inner strength that no amount of physical violence can diminish. It is at this point in the narrative that the cruelty of the system becomes most painfully evident. While Tom's suffering serves as an individual act of endurance and resistance, it is also symbolic of the suffering of all enslaved people. His unwavering refusal to betray another human being stands in stark contrast to the world around him, a world that is indifferent to the value of human life and whose justice is subverted by the inherent inequalities of the institution of slavery. Tom's silent resistance reflects the quiet, unrecognized resistance of countless other slaves who, though stripped of their dignity, maintain their humanity through their faith and integrity. Throughout all of this, Cassie, another slave at Legree's plantation, becomes a key figure in Tom's life. She is a woman who has been deeply scarred by the horrors of slavery, and like Tom, carries with her the trauma of loss and violence. Cassie represents a different kind of strength, a strength born from a desire for survival rather than spiritual endurance. Unlike Tom, who remains committed to his faith, Cassie has lost her belief in a higher power due to the injustices she has suffered. However, she finds in Tom a reminder of the kind of moral clarity she once possessed. She sees in Tom's strength a form of resistance, even if she herself is not yet ready to embrace it fully. Cassie's own backstory is tragic, and it speaks to the broader theme of how slavery not only harms the enslaved, but also corrupts the souls of those who perpetuate it. Cassie's narrative is a tale of despair, yet she too begins to experience a transformation through her interactions with Tom. She sees in him a potential for redemption that she thought was long lost, and in turn, she becomes more willing to seek out her own path to freedom. Her relationship with Tom is complex, rooted in both empathy and a mutual understanding of the deep scars that slavery leaves on all who are affected by it. As the narrative unfolds, Tom's resilience in the face of extreme cruelty continues to highlight the fundamental themes of the novel. His unwavering faith, moral clarity, and refusal to break under the weight of slavery serve as a powerful critique of an institution that seeks to strip individuals of their humanity. But it is also a celebration of the enduring power of faith, hope, and love, even in the darkest of times. While the cruelty of Legree and the plantation system around him threatens to consume Tom, his inner strength remains unbroken, offering a glimmer of light amidst the overwhelming darkness of oppression. Tom's character, rooted in his faith, becomes a beacon of resistance, one that stands firm even as the world around him crumbles. Tom's suffering under the cruel hand of Simon Legree deepens, as his body is subjected to more physical abuse, but his spirit remains resolute. Legree's cruelty knows no bounds, as he subjects Tom to grueling labor and cruel beatings, hoping that with time he will break the man's will. However, Tom's unwavering faith remains his shield, even as his body is crushed under the weight of oppression. It is here, at his lowest point, that Tom's true character is fully realized, revealing the strength of his resolve and the depth of his commitment to his beliefs. As Tom's situation worsens, a poignant moment occurs when he is visited by a man named George Shelby. George is the son of his former owner, and he arrives at Legree's plantation with the intention of fulfilling the promise made by his mother to buy Tom's freedom. Tom, overwhelmed with emotion, recognizes the gesture as an act of kindness in a world that has stripped him of his humanity. Despite all the torment he has endured, Tom's sense of compassion and gratitude never wavers. He reassures George that his suffering has not been in vain, that his hope lies not in the promise of freedom from Legree, but in the promise of an eternal freedom that transcends earthly chains. This moment between Tom and George Shelby becomes a powerful symbol of the emotional and spiritual resilience that Tom continues to embody. His ability to forgive and remain steadfast in his faith serves as a sharp contrast to the hardened heart of Legree, whose life has been consumed by cruelty and the insatiable desire for power. While Legree has built his life on the suffering of others, Tom continues to rise above this, maintaining his moral integrity and compassion. His belief in Christ, in the salvation that awaits him beyond this life, allows him to forgive even those who torment him. Tom's enduring sense of love, faith, and forgiveness is perhaps most powerfully demonstrated when, faced with the harshest of circumstances, he refuses to betray his fellow slaves. In a final act of defiance against Legree's cruelty, Tom chooses not to reveal the location of Cassie and Emmeline, two other slaves who are attempting to escape. Despite the severe beatings and threats of death, Tom remains resolute, understanding that his strength lies not in physical survival, but in the preservation of his dignity and faith. The ultimate expression of his character lies in his refusal to compromise his moral values for the sake of his own safety. In this moment, Tom becomes a martyr, a symbol of resistance and the power of nonviolent defiance in the face of overwhelming adversity. It is here that the novel reveals one of its most important lessons: the power of inner strength and moral clarity in the face of inhumane conditions. Tom's ability to endure physical suffering without losing his sense of self or his commitment to higher principles serves as a critique of the dehumanizing force of slavery. Stowe's portrayal of Tom as a figure of immense moral fortitude is not just a testament to his character, but a call to action for those who witness his story. By elevating Tom to the status of a martyr, Stowe challenges her readers to confront the moral failings of a society that allowed such suffering to persist. However, it is not just Tom's internal strength that defines him. His relationship with the other slaves on Legree's plantation also illustrates the interconnectedness of the oppressed. Despite the immense hardships he faces, Tom does not view his suffering as an isolated experience. He continues to inspire those around him, providing a moral compass and a beacon of hope for his fellow slaves. His acts of kindness and compassion, even in the face of unimaginable pain, serve as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humanity can endure. Cassie, who had previously been cynical and broken by the cruelty of her experiences, begins to see a glimmer of hope in Tom. She comes to recognize in him a strength that she had long since lost. Tom's ability to love and forgive, even in the most dire of circumstances, slowly draws her out of her despair. It is through her interactions with Tom that Cassie begins to rediscover a sense of purpose and faith, even if only in a small measure. She starts to understand that there is more to life than survival. There is, at least for some, a possibility of redemption and a glimmer of justice, even if that justice may not come in this life. Cassie's transformation is both a reflection of Tom's influence and a powerful statement about the power of human connection in the face of cruelty. Tom's example shows her that it is possible to hold on to hope, to maintain dignity, and to preserve the capacity for love, even in a system that systematically seeks to strip away these very qualities. In many ways, Cassie's evolving understanding of Tom's strength represents the awakening of a deeper moral consciousness in the face of systemic oppression. As the brutality of Legree's plantation continues to take its toll on Tom, there is a growing tension between the possibility of physical escape and the moral choice to remain. Tom, despite all his suffering, remains anchored to his spiritual beliefs, refusing to compromise his principles even in the face of death. His willingness to accept the harshest punishment rather than betray his fellow slaves or abandon his faith becomes a testament to the triumph of the human spirit over the cruelty of slavery. The narrative takes a pivotal turn as Tom's suffering reaches its peak. He is subjected to further physical abuse and is pushed to the brink of death. Yet, even as his life slips away, he continues to hold on to the faith that has sustained him throughout his ordeal. His final moments are a reflection of the core themes of the novel: the power of faith, the strength of human dignity, and the belief in a justice that transcends the earthly realm. Through Tom's suffering, Stowe forces her readers to confront the cruelty of slavery and the moral implications of a system that devalues human life. Tom's unyielding faith and moral clarity in the face of unrelenting cruelty challenge the reader to consider the value of life, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the need for change in a society that has allowed such suffering to persist. His refusal to give in to despair and his commitment to his faith stand as a powerful call for the abolition of slavery and the creation of a more just and humane world. Tom's death, though tragic, marks a moment of spiritual triumph and transformation in Uncle Tom's Cabin, as the culmination of his suffering brings with it both a profound reflection on the themes of faith, sacrifice, and redemption. Tom's final moments, spent in a haze of pain and exhaustion, symbolize the depth of his faith and the power of spiritual endurance in the face of systemic cruelty. His last words, filled with forgiveness and a prayer for the salvation of his tormentors, resonate with a strength that transcends his physical suffering. In his death, Tom becomes a martyr, his story an indomitable testament to the power of moral integrity and spiritual resilience. As Tom dies, the response from the other characters on Legree's plantation paints a vivid picture of the contrasting reactions to Tom's spirit. Legree, whose cruelty has brought Tom to this point, is unable to understand the depth of Tom's faith and forgiveness. To him, Tom's death is a meaningless end, a reflection of the futility of his efforts to break the slave spirit. Legree's hardened heart is unable to fathom the depth of Tom's moral clarity, and the bitterness of his own soul prevents him from seeing the transformative power that Tom's death will have. In contrast to Legree's callousness, other characters on the plantation, like Cassie and Emmeline, are profoundly affected by Tom's final moments. Cassie, who has long struggled with her own despair, finds a moment of redemption in Tom's death. Tom's unwavering commitment to his faith and his refusal to compromise his moral values, even in the face of death, inspire Cassie to reconsider her own choices. In his death, Tom becomes a symbol of hope for her, a beacon that reminds her of the possibility of redemption in a world that has long since stripped away her belief in the goodness of others. Tom's example serves as a catalyst for Cassie's eventual escape from Legree's plantation, providing her with the courage to leave behind the oppressive system that has consumed her. Emmeline, too, feels the loss of Tom deeply. Though she has known him for only a short time, Tom's kindness, wisdom, and compassion have left an indelible mark on her heart. Emmeline's sense of loss is compounded by the realization that Tom's death is not just a personal tragedy, but also a reflection of the broader injustice of slavery. Tom's unwavering faith and his refusal to submit to the forces of oppression show Emmeline that there is a life beyond the brutality of the plantation, a life where one's spirit can remain intact, even in the most dire of circumstances. For her, Tom's death is a painful reminder of the cost of freedom, and it motivates her to take the next step toward her own liberation. As the news of Tom's death spreads, it ignites a fire of resistance within the hearts of those who have witnessed his suffering. His death does not go unnoticed. Instead, it becomes a rallying cry for the abolitionist movement. Stowe's portrayal of Tom as a martyr not only critiques the institution of slavery, but also serves as a call to action for her readers. Tom's death is not a simple loss. It is a moment of spiritual transcendence that transcends his personal experience and becomes a collective symbol of the need for social change. It underscores the novel's central message that slavery dehumanizes both the victim and the perpetrator, and that true liberation can only be achieved when individuals rise above the systemic forces that oppress them. Tom's death is also juxtaposed with the eventual fate of Legree. While Tom's suffering leads to spiritual triumph and redemption, Legree's cruelty ultimately isolates him from any possibility of redemption. His soul, hardened by years of sin, remains impervious to the transformative power of love and forgiveness. He is left alone, estranged from the human connection that might have saved him, while the memory of Tom's sacrifice becomes a beacon for others to follow. Legree's inability to grasp the depth of Tom's faith and his refusal to see the humanity in others only serves to underscore the stark contrast between the two men. The conclusion of Tom's story serves as a powerful indictment of the institution of slavery, exposing the moral bankruptcy of a system that allows such cruelty to persist. Stowe uses Tom's death as a way to challenge her readers to confront the ugly truth of slavery and its dehumanizing effects. Through Tom's unwavering faith and his refusal to be broken, The novel reveals that true freedom lies not in the physical escape from bondage, but in the ability to preserve one's dignity, morality, and sense of self in the face of oppression. Tom's death, though painful, marks the beginning of a broader movement toward change, one that will ultimately see the abolition of slavery and the recognition of the inherent humanity of all people. In the aftermath of Tom's death, the emotional toll of his life on the plantation continues to reverberate across the novel. Stowe shifts her focus to the impact that Tom's story has on his former owner, George Shelby, and his family. George, who has been deeply moved by Tom's suffering, is now determined to fulfill the promise of his mother and free Tom, albeit too late. The irony of George's failure to save Tom while simultaneously freeing his other slaves is a poignant reminder of the limitations of individual actions in the face of institutionalized injustice. It is a stark reminder that real change requires more than personal efforts. It demands systemic change, something that transcends the actions of one person or family. Tom's death also serves as a moment of reflection for his former master, Mr. Shelby. The legacy of Tom's life and death forces him to confront his own complicity in the system of slavery. Though he is not the villain that Legree is, Mr. Shelby's failure to act in the face of his own moral knowledge highlights the complexities of the institution of slavery. His ultimate realization that Tom's life was worth more than the system that enslaved him marks a significant moment of moral reckoning. However, the novel's focus on Mr. Shelby's growing awareness serves to underscore the larger point that slavery cannot be reformed. It must be abolished entirely. It is not enough for individuals to awaken to the injustice of slavery. They must work together to dismantle the system that perpetuates it. After the heart-wrenching death of Uncle Tom, the novel shifts its focus to the emotional and moral consequences of the system of slavery on those who are touched by it, especially on characters like Cassie and Emmeline. These women, who have been subjected to unimaginable cruelty and abuse, are now faced with the possibility of escape and a future beyond the confines of the plantation. Their interactions with each other and their individual transformations serve as a powerful commentary on the enduring resilience of the human spirit. Cassie, once a woman who had lost all hope and succumbed to the despair of her situation, finds new strength after witnessing Tom's death. She had for so long been weighed down by the anguish of her own suffering, which had made her a hard and bitter woman. Her pain came from the repeated trauma of losing her loved ones and being subjected to the harshness of her environment. The brutality of her life and the hopelessness she felt in the face of a system that treated her as little more than property had turned her into someone who, at one point, had little to live for. She had resigned herself to the belief that there was no escape from the cruelty of slavery until she met Tom. Tom's faith and fortitude ignited something in Cassie that she thought she had lost forever. As much as she tried to bury her emotions, Tom's unyielding kindness and spiritual strength made an indelible impression on her heart. Though she did not always openly express her gratitude, she could not deny that Tom's influence on her was profound. His refusal to be broken, even as his body was worn down by abuse, was something she had never encountered in her own life. For Cassie, Tom became a symbol of what was possible if one could maintain the strength of character and the resolve to never give up. Cassie's transformation is not immediate, nor is it easy. She initially grapples with feelings of deep betrayal and despair. After Tom's death, she feels the crushing weight of the system that has robbed her of so much: her children, her sense of agency, and even her ability to hope. But in her private moments, away from the scrutiny of those around her, she begins to reflect on the lessons she learned from Tom's unwavering faith. For the first time in years, she begins to entertain the possibility that she is not powerless, that there is something greater she can do with her life. It is in this moment of internal awakening that Cassie decides to escape the plantation. But her decision to flee is not motivated by a simple desire for freedom. It is rooted in her newfound belief that she deserves more than a life of misery and suffering. Her escape is a testament to the transformation she has undergone. She is no longer the bitter, defeated woman she once was. She is now someone who has reclaimed her sense of agency and strength. The decision to leave represents a monumental shift in her character, as she breaks free from the mental shackles that have held her captive for so long. In her quest for freedom, she also seeks redemption, not only for herself, but also for her children, and for all those who are still trapped in the hell of slavery. Emmeline, the young girl who had suffered under Legree's brutal control, also begins to find her way toward freedom after Tom's death. Her journey, however, is one that is more heavily influenced by her sense of personal loss and longing for connection. Emmeline, unlike Cassie, has not experienced the same level of emotional transformation. She is still a young girl, terrified of the world and unsure of where she fits within it. Tom's death serves as a poignant reminder to Emmeline of the fragility of life and the arbitrary nature of fate, but it also motivates her to take steps toward her own liberation. Like Cassie, Emmeline is not able to escape her tormentor, Legree, immediately. She struggles with feelings of guilt and confusion, as the idea of leaving behind everything she has ever known is both terrifying and alluring. But Tom's death serves as a catalyst for her decision to break free. Tom's example gives her the strength to act, to move beyond the small confines of the plantation, and to take the first steps toward a life in which she can finally be in control of her own destiny. In many ways, the development of both Cassie and Emmeline reflects the broader theme of resistance that runs throughout Uncle Tom's Cabin. The novel shows that while slavery may dehumanize and oppress, it cannot fully extinguish the desire for freedom. Even in the darkest of circumstances, the human spirit yearns for something more, whether that be faith, redemption, or simply the hope of a better life. Tom's death, while tragic, catalyzes the awakening of these two women, who ultimately find the courage to break free of the shackles that have held them for so long. Their eventual escape from Legree's plantation marks a turning point not just in the narrative of the novel, but in the larger fight against slavery. As Cassie and Emmeline flee into the night, their departure is symbolic of the broader resistance movement that had been gaining momentum in the United States. The abolitionist cause, which had once been a small and marginalized effort, was beginning to grow in strength and visibility, fueled by the stories of brave men and women who, like Cassie and Emmeline, sought freedom against impossible odds. Cassie's and Emmeline's story also underscores a central message of Uncle Tom's Cabin, that slavery affects everyone, regardless of race or background. While the novel's central focus is on the plight of Black slaves, The experiences of Cassie and Emmeline show that even the enslaved who are forced to live in bondage are not immune to the emotional and psychological toll of the system. Though their suffering may look different from Tom's, their lives are equally defined by loss, trauma, and the need to break free. Their story, woven into the larger tapestry of the novel, adds complexity and nuance to Stowe's critique of the institution of slavery. As Cassie and Emmeline's journey to freedom unfolds, the reader is left to reflect on the immense cost of slavery, not just to those who are directly enslaved, but also to those who, like Cassie and Emmeline, are caught in its devastating web. The novel reminds us that true freedom is not just the physical absence of chains, but the reclaiming of one's humanity, agency, and dignity. And for Cassie and Emmeline, their escape is the first step in reclaiming all that had been taken from them, a step that would continue to resonate in the generations to come. As the novel progresses, the emotional weight of Uncle Tom's Cabin deepens, and the story continues to shift its focus between the fates of characters who embody the complexities of slavery's dehumanizing effects. Among these characters is the prominent figure of Mr. Shelby, whose internal struggle represents the moral conflict experienced by those who, despite being part of the system of slavery, possess an innate sense of compassion and decency. Mr. Shelby's relationship with his slaves becomes increasingly difficult to reconcile with his moral compass, as he is forced to confront the repercussions of his actions. Mr. Shelby, a man who had initially been portrayed as a relatively kind and gentle slave owner, is presented with a deeply moral dilemma after he is forced to sell Uncle Tom. His relationship with Tom, which had been built on mutual respect and affection, is abruptly shattered by the economic and legal forces that govern the institution of slavery. The realization that he must sell a man who has been both loyal and selfless over the years is emotionally devastating for Mr. Shelby. He cannot reconcile his personal admiration for Tom with the brutal reality of the institution to which he belongs. The fact that he must subject someone who has been like a trusted family member to the cruelty of the market serves as a turning point in his character development. As Mr. Shelby's internal conflict grows, his actions reveal the growing tension between his personal moral beliefs and his position within a society that condones slavery. In the midst of this personal crisis, Mr. Shelby's wife, Mrs. Shelby, emerges as another significant character. While Mr. Shelby grapples with guilt and internal turmoil, Mrs. Shelby's resolve is much clearer. She refuses to sit idly by while her husband plays his part in maintaining the system of slavery. Her determination to act, to do something to prevent the breaking apart of families and the tragic separation of loved ones, highlights the strength and resilience of women in the fight against slavery. Mrs. Shelby's character arc stands as a stark contrast to her husband's. Unlike Mr. Shelby, whose position as a slave owner creates a barrier between his ideals and his actions, Mrs. Shelby is determined to take an active role in resisting the oppression around her. As her husband's involvement in the sale of Tom becomes more apparent, she begins to take more definitive steps to protect those whom she holds dear. Her role in assisting Uncle Tom to escape is one of the most poignant moments in the novel. She works tirelessly behind the scenes, using her position as a slaveholder's wife to help guide Tom through the treacherous process of evading capture. Mrs. Shelby's compassion, despite the constraints of her social position, speaks to the deep moral courage that drives her to confront the injustices around her. In the background of these struggles, Eliza, the runaway slave who has become one of the novel's central figures, continues her own journey of survival. Eliza's flight from the Shelby plantation after the sale of her son, Harry, to another owner, is one of the most heart-rending parts of the narrative. Her desperation to protect her son and her determination to escape the clutches of slavery, which has already torn apart her family, is a story of motherhood and sacrifice. Eliza's leap across the icy river, clutching Harry in her arms, symbolizes the lengths to which a mother will go to protect her child. It also serves as a powerful metaphor for the hope and resilience that exist even in the most dire of circumstances. Eliza's journey toward freedom is one that challenges the boundaries of society and personal survival. She faces unimaginable dangers, both from the elements and from those who seek to recapture her. Yet, through her fierce love for her son and her unyielding determination, she finds the strength to navigate these obstacles. In her escape, Eliza also embodies the broader struggle of enslaved people in their quest for liberty, fleeing not only from the physical chains of slavery, but also from the psychological shackles of a system that dehumanizes and oppresses them. As Eliza's story unfolds, she encounters various characters who either aid or hinder her progress. The most notable of these is the Quaker woman, Rachel Halliday, who provides shelter and protection for Eliza and Harry during their flight. Rachel's role in the novel is crucial, as she represents the goodness and humanity that can be found even in a society built upon systemic oppression. Her quiet yet unwavering support for Eliza serves as a reminder that not all individuals condone the institution of slavery, and that there are those who are willing to risk everything to help others escape its clutches. The characters of Mrs. Shelby, Eliza, and Mr. Shelby contribute to the evolving portrayal of slavery's impact on individuals, highlighting the fact that the institution of slavery does not only harm those who are directly enslaved, but also complicates the lives and consciences of those who are complicit in it. Through their individual stories, Stowe emphasizes the ways in which slavery permeates all aspects of society and affects every person, regardless of their race or position. Stowe's nuanced exploration of these characters' inner conflicts also sheds light on the broader implications of the slavery system. The decision to participate in or resist slavery is not always clear-cut. For Mr. Shelby, the burden of his conscience weighs heavily on him, and he becomes increasingly aware of his complicity in the institution of slavery. His moral dilemma, while seemingly less intense than the suffering of those like Tom and Eliza, points to the ways in which slavery ultimately degrades and corrupts everyone involved in it. As we move forward in the narrative, the choices and actions of these characters, particularly Mrs. Shelby and Eliza, become emblematic of the personal sacrifices and risks taken by those who sought to help enslaved people. These individuals, despite their own struggles, contribute to the larger movement against slavery, which continues to build momentum throughout the novel. Mrs. Shelby's active resistance and Eliza's flight from the plantation become acts of defiance as they challenge the moral decay of a society that perpetuates the enslavement of human beings. The characters' intertwined fates illuminate the interconnectedness of individual struggles within the larger social structure of slavery. Each decision, no matter how small, has lasting consequences, not only for the characters themselves, but for the future of those who will come after them. As Uncle Tom's Cabin moves toward its climactic conclusion, these characters' paths will continue to intersect, shaping their destinies, and ultimately contributing to the larger narrative of abolition. Through their stories, Stowe captures the complexity of the human experience within the context of slavery, urging her readers to recognize the humanity in everyone, regardless of their station in life. As Uncle Tom's Cabin reaches its conclusion, the intensity of the emotional and moral stakes becomes overwhelming, culminating in the powerful and heart-wrenching resolution of Uncle Tom's fate. Throughout the novel, Harriet Beecher Stowe has carefully crafted a tapestry of individual struggles against the backdrop of a larger social evil, the institution of slavery. And now, in the final moments, she brings together the threads of these lives in a tragic and redemptive culmination. Stowe's masterful handling of Uncle Tom's journey, both literal and spiritual, offers a profound meditation on the nature of suffering, grace, and the ultimate power of faith. Uncle Tom, who has endured unimaginable hardship, betrayal, and loss throughout the novel, finds himself in the final stages of his life, enslaved under the ruthless plantation owner, Simon Legree. Legree, the embodiment of the brutality and callousness that defines the worst aspects of the institution of slavery, emerges as the novel's antagonist in its latter half. His cruelty, matched only by his complete disregard for human dignity, represents the epitome of the dehumanizing system that has caused so much suffering for Tom and others like him. Yet despite the physical and psychological torment that Legree inflicts upon him, Tom maintains his deep faith and unshakable resolve, which becomes his ultimate form of resistance. The final chapter of Uncle Tom's life on Legree's plantation is marked by a series of intensely moving moments. The struggle between Tom's faith and Legree's brutal methods is one of the most compelling aspects of this final section. Legree, whose attempts to break Tom's spirit through violence and threats ultimately fail, becomes increasingly frustrated with Tom's unwavering belief in a higher power. Tom's capacity to forgive, even in the face of overwhelming cruelty, confounds Legree, who is unable to understand or accept a faith that transcends the physical and the material. Tom's refusal to yield to Legree's demands, even when faced with death, marks the apex of his spiritual journey. In the end, Uncle Tom dies not from the physical torment alone, but from the emotional toll of the world's injustices. His death is both a martyrdom and a triumph, a final act of resistance that exposes the grotesque reality of slavery and the profound inhumanity of those who perpetuate it. Tom's death, in all its painful, inevitable finality, is a moment of spiritual transcendence. Through his suffering, he embodies the very ideals of Christian charity, forgiveness, and faith that Stowe seeks to highlight throughout the novel. Tom's unwavering devotion to God and his refusal to denounce his principles, even when facing the specter of death, represent the ultimate victory of the human spirit over oppression. As Tom's story reaches its tragic conclusion, we see a shift toward hope and redemption for other characters who are part of this larger narrative. Eliza, the woman who has fought so fiercely to protect her son, has made it to freedom in the North. Her journey is one of the most significant arcs in the novel, as it symbolizes the power of maternal love, courage, and determination. Eliza's eventual escape, aided by the underground network of abolitionists, represents the very real possibility of freedom. And while her trials have been excruciating, her survival and her eventual reunion with her son, Harry, serve as a testament to the strength of the human will. Eliza's story is juxtaposed with the fate of George Shelby, the son of Mr. Shelby, who has long been a sympathetic figure in the novel. George has witnessed firsthand the suffering of his father and mother's slaves, and his compassion for them ultimately leads him to take action. By the time Uncle Tom dies, George has taken the bold step of purchasing his freedom, ensuring that he will never again be a part of the system that destroyed so many lives, including Tom's. George's decision to free his father's slaves, including Uncle Tom, and to pledge his life to the abolitionist cause, signifies the transformative power of empathy, compassion, and moral clarity. It is through his actions that Stowe suggests the possibility of redemption for those who, though complicit in slavery, are capable of transcending the sins of the past. The novel's conclusion presents a vision of moral and social change. Through the deaths of Tom and other figures, like Eliza's reunion with her son, Stowe paints a picture of the possibility for personal and collective redemption. Tom's death, though tragic, is portrayed as a moment of spiritual purity that galvanizes those around him to action. His unwavering faith and fortitude serve as a moral beacon, inspiring those who witness his suffering to rise above their circumstances and take a stand against the institution of slavery. Tom's sacrifice becomes the catalyst for change, not only for his own family, but for the larger abolitionist movement that is growing across the nation. In this way, Stowe uses Tom's death as both a tragic and transformative event, one that underscores the central themes of the novel, the dehumanizing effects of slavery, and the moral imperative to resist it. Through Tom's example, Stowe urges her readers to recognize the humanity in all people, regardless of race, and to take action against an institution that seeks to deny that humanity. Tom's death is, in a sense, a moral clarion call, urging those who have the power to act to do so in the name of justice and humanity. The conclusion of Uncle Tom's Cabin also speaks to the larger issue of how systemic injustice can be overturned. While the immediate tragedy of Uncle Tom's death is felt deeply by those closest to him, it is clear that the fight against slavery is far from over. The novel ends with a sense of moral urgency and with a call to action for future generations. Tom's legacy, rooted in his unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity and the importance of spiritual integrity, becomes a rallying cry for the abolitionist cause. The novel's final moments, steeped in both sorrow and hope, suggest that while the road to freedom and justice is long and fraught with difficulty, it is ultimately a road that must be traveled. In the end, Uncle Tom's Cabin serves not only as a work of fiction, but as a moral and political manifesto, a powerful indictment of the institution of slavery, and a call for immediate action. Harriet Beecher Stowe's emotional appeal, coupled with her vivid portrayal of slavery's cruelty and its moral consequences, remains one of the most important contributions to the literature of abolition and social reform. Tom's story may have ended in tragedy, but his example, his sacrifice, and his unshakable faith continue to resonate, reminding readers that the fight for justice is not just the struggle of one man or one generation, but of all who believe in the equality and dignity of every human being. As we conclude Uncle Tom's Cabin, the novel's impact on both literature and history becomes abundantly clear. Harriet Beecher Stowe's portrayal of slavery, not just as an institution, but as a moral blight on humanity, resonated deeply with 19th century audiences and continues to echo through the ages. Tom's journey from suffering to spiritual triumph, his unwavering faith in the face of inhumanity, and his ultimate sacrifice stand as a testament to the power of individual integrity in the fight against systemic evil. Stowe's narrative was never merely about individual characters, however. It was a call to action for an entire society. Through the pain and perseverance of Tom, the courage of Eliza, and the moral awakening of characters like George Shelby, Stowe painted a picture of a world where slavery's grip could be broken, not just through legal means, but through profound changes in the hearts and minds of those who would stand against it. In the end, the fight against slavery was framed as both a personal and societal battle, one requiring courage, compassion, and a recognition of the shared humanity of all people. The novel's themes of morality, redemption, and resistance continue to be as relevant today as they were in the mid-1800s. In highlighting the immense cruelty of slavery and the moral cost of inaction, Uncle Tom's Cabin remains a powerful reminder of the importance of standing against injustice in all its forms. Stowe's narrative doesn't allow readers to turn away from the suffering of others. Instead, it compels them to look, to feel, and to act. While the historical context of Uncle Tom's Cabin may be rooted in the American South before the Civil War, the novel's relevance transcends time and place. It urges readers, even in the modern era, to confront the ways in which systemic oppression can still be found in various corners of society. Tom's unwavering faith and his refusal to be broken by cruelty offer a model of resilience and moral clarity, reminding us that the fight for justice is not a battle that can be won through laws alone, but requires the will of individuals to act with integrity and compassion. In many ways, Uncle Tom's Cabin helped catalyze the abolitionist movement, making it impossible for future generations to ignore the moral implications of slavery. The novel made the institution not just a political issue, but a deeply personal one for its readers, shaping public opinion and fostering greater empathy. Its portrayal of the horrors of slavery, particularly the emotional and physical toll it took on families like Tom's, resonated with countless readers, fueling the collective desire for change. However, the novel's legacy is not without controversy. Over time, some of its portrayals, particularly of certain characters and its use of sentimentalism, have been critiqued for reinforcing stereotypes. But regardless of these criticisms, its historical significance cannot be understated. Stowe's ability to humanize the enslaved, while simultaneously condemning a morally bankrupt system of oppression, continues to make Uncle Tom's Cabin a cornerstone in the literature of social justice. Ultimately, Tom's death, while tragic, serves as a symbol of the possibility for redemption, both for individuals and for society at large. His spirit endures in the movement to end slavery and in the larger fight for human dignity, equality, and justice. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, with its complex characters, its call for moral action, and its demand for empathy, remains a crucial piece of literature in the ongoing struggle for a more just world. Through Tom's unwavering faith and his refusal to be crushed by the forces of oppression, Stowe reminds us that no matter how dire the situation, the human spirit has the power to endure, and that, through collective action, we can rise above the injustices of the world.